Good morning, all. Suburban Sentinel here, along with Bella the camera cat. And it's been a fairly long hiatus between videos. My wife and I are making final arrangements to unass from the unconstitutional state of Connecticut, and that's taking up a lot of time and effort. But anyway, today I'd like to talk a little bit about real estate, specifically real estate for preppers. So if you're into emergency preparedness and you're thinking of moving or buying a home or selling a home, this is for you. Or if you're a really long-term planner and you're young, this is food for thought. Now, conventional wisdom says that preppers should own their property. And I followed that wisdom as well. But now that we're moving, I'm taking a look at that issue again because, as my grandfather said, question everything. And after a lot of analysis, I'm not so sure that that conventional wisdom is the right thing for everybody. So let's talk real estate. Before getting into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to lay a little bit of a foundation. Now, when we're talking about real estate for the purposes of this video, I'm talking about your primary residence, not a vacation home or land to be used as a bug-out location or anything of that sort. We're talking about your full-time residence, whether you should buy it or rent it. Also, I'm cognizant that buying or renting land with buildings thereon is not the only option. I know several people who live full-time in those big recreational vehicle dealies. And in my book, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just beyond the scope of this video. And finally, I do not proclaim to have all of the answers. Whether one should buy or rent real estate is a question that is highly dependent on the facts and circumstances for each family. So in this video, we're just exploring the issues, not coming to any conclusions for a particular individual or group of people. So let's get into it. There are several advantages to owning a home over renting one. The first of which is freedom with respect to use. If you own a fee simple interest in the property, you can generally do more with the property than someone who rents a similar home. So for example, if you have a single family home, in most places you will be able to plant a garden if the zoning permits it. Whereas if you rent a home, there could be restrictions in the lease against that. Another great advantage of ownership is stability. If you rent a home, the owner or landlord could decide to sell the property and knock it down and build something else or whatever. So if you have a fee simple ownership interest, you have much more stability in most cases, and we'll look at a few exceptions to that rule later in this video. The other advantages to ownership, at least potential advantages, are financial in nature. Assuming that you don't pay cash for the home and that you sign a note with a mortgage, when you pay that note and the mortgage balance comes down, at least in theory, you are building equity in the property. And once that note is paid off, you'll own it outright. Another potential advantage that we haven't seen in America in a while is appreciation, asset appreciation. In many places, the value of homes increases over time. So if you're an owner, you will be able to take advantage of that appreciation in real estate prices. Now, let's discuss a few of the disadvantages of home ownership. The first of which is that real estate is what's known as sticky. And that means home ownership makes it, in general, more difficult to relocate. When you relocate and sell a home, obviously there are going to be transactional costs. There's a lot of time and effort involved in selling a home. You have to find the right buyer. So homeowners tend to stay put more than renters. This can be problematic if one has to move or if one wants to move in order to take advantage of other opportunities or seek a different lifestyle. And this is not even considering some of the financial implications. It can be very tough if you need to or want to move and the outstanding balance on the note on the home is more than its current value at the time. So you have those problems as well. Another major issue with respect to home ownership is costs. If you're a renter and there's a major problem with the rental property, you call the landlord for it to be fixed. When you're the homeowner, it's all on you. And repairs and maintenance can be a killer. To use my wife and I as an example, after we bought this house a couple of years after that, we ran into a very serious drainage problem with the property, one that had to be rectified quickly and properly, and it was not something that was an insurance issue. This was something that was not foreseeable and beyond our control, and the bottom line is the repair bill was in excess of $60,000, and that was quite an unwelcome surprise. Another big disadvantage of home ownership is the level of commitment. At least in the United States, and for most people, the primary residence is a family's biggest asset. It can mean a very large investment of money in both absolute terms and as a portion of that family's overall wealth. So you can have an awful lot of money tied up in a house, especially in an area such as where my wife and I live, where properties are relatively expensive in relation to the rest of the country. So a home can mean a sizable investment. Also, I'd like to briefly discuss some of the risks inherent in home ownership that don't get all that much coverage or play from the financial experts talking about housing. The first of which is casualty. Because real estate is generally immobile, you are subject to the vagaries of Mother Nature. And certainly we saw it around here a couple of years ago when Hurricane Sandy came through and knocked down a whole lot of the houses, or flooded the houses on the beach. Now, I realize to a certain extent that this type of casualty, like the weather or earthquakes, can be mitigated by insurance, but that is a whole other can of worms. Another type of risk I'd like to talk about is the government. When you own a piece of real estate, you can be subjected to the political winds and the vagaries of having to operate in a county or a state or a municipality where you're not in control of the rules. Say, for example, taxes. When my wife and I bought this home 10 years ago, I think our taxes were around $6,600 a year. 10 years later, our taxes have more than doubled to, I think they're just a hair under $14,000 a year now. Now, of course, I'm cognizant of the fact that operating costs for everybody, including a municipality, keep rising. But one thing is for sure, my income has not doubled in the last 10 years, although my tax bill certainly has. And that is a problem. Another potential governmental problem is changing of the rules and not just the tax laws. Properties and neighborhoods can be rezoned, and the purpose for which you bought your house may no longer be acceptable or legal. There's eminent domain. In rare cases, the government decides that it's more important for either the government entity or, now, according to the Supreme Court, a third party with commercial interests to own your property, and they basically take it from you without your consent. I realize that they have to compensate you for it, but again, that is a whole other can of worms. And then there is the really dumbass crazy stuff that happens out of left field. And the best example I can think of for this is, I guess in the early 80s, I was in grad school out in St. Louis, Missouri, and there's a little town outside the city called Times Beach. And I don't know if anyone from the area remembers all the details, but a crooked contractor and a couple of his cronies sprayed contaminated oil on all the roadways in town. And the oil was full of dioxin. And P.S., after years of back and forth and people and horses and getting sick and all kinds of other crazy stuff, essentially the government came in and condemned the entire town. This was a small town, but they condemned the entire thing and knocked the whole town down. And I'm sure for the residents there at the time, it was a real mess. And things like that still happen today. I haven't heard of a contamination case like that lately, but we have had things about fracking and all kinds of stuff like that. So I don't think anyone's absolutely immune, even if you're out in the boonies. So how does prepping fit into all of this crazy talk about real estate? Well, in essence, it comes down to a simple choice. Do you want to make your housing priority about stability or flexibility? Say, for example, that, God forbid, we have a catastrophic storm that wipes out an entire region of the state or the country. Now, under those circumstances, I'm assuming that most people living in the area would rather be a renter than a homeowner. Because as the old saying goes, when things go awry, renters say goodbye. On the flip side, assume, for example, that there is a nationwide financial collapse, and the best way to get by is to hunker down at home and try to grow as much of your own food as possible. And this situation will likely continue for a period of several years or more. Well, under those conditions, I'm certain that most people, especially preppers, would rather own their homes. The problem is we don't have a crystal ball. In an ideal world, we would be prepped effectively for either situation. But most of us don't have the financial wherewithal to have a good, secure, and productive homestead and have enough income and or assets to be able to walk away from that homestead without us being hurt too badly. So there is the conundrum: stability versus flexibility. I would love to know what you folks have to say about this situation. Questions and enlightening comments and video responses are always welcome. Thanks for watching. This is the Suburban Sentinel, along with Bella the Camera Cat, who's been asleep at my side the whole time. Prep and be safe, everybody.